You know the story of Noah's Ark, right? I mean, we all do. Animals, two by two, a giant boat, a world-covering flood. It's one of those stories we learn as kids. But what if that simple tale is just the tip of the iceberg? What if it's actually a super deep, complex, theological story? Okay, let's really get into this. Yeah, we often see it as this straightforward survival adventure, but when you start to actually dig into the text and what scholars say about it, you find this incredible story about judgment, salvation, and the very nature of a divine promise. Trust me, it's way more than just a kid's story. So for this deep dive, we're leaning on some really detailed scholarly commentary that unpacks the original Hebrew text. And these sources, they really push us to see the flood story as something more than just a historical account. It's this carefully crafted narrative, just packed with symbolic and theological meaning. To really get the story, we've got to start right where the Bible does, with how things were in the world. And let me tell you, it was not a pretty picture. The whole narrative kicks off on a really dark stage, setting things up for a pretty dramatic intervention. The whole thing really hinges on this massive contrast. On one side, you've got the whole world, described as so corrupt and violent that it literally grieved God's heart. But then, on the other side, there's this one guy, Noah. And he's described as righteous, blameless, someone who found favor with God. This contrast, it's the whole reason the story even happens. It's why Noah gets the call. And so, this one righteous man gets a command that is honestly almost impossible to believe. Build a massive boat, an ark, because a flood is coming. A flood that's going to wipe the entire slate clean. But the key here is that the ark's job isn't just about destruction. It's about preserving life for a brand new start. Okay, so getting a command like that is one thing. But actually following through, that's a whole different level. This next part of the story is all about Noah's response, which the text shows as this incredible act of pure faith and obedience. The commentary we're looking at really hammers this point home. Noah's obedience was absolute. He didn't just get the gist of it, he followed every single tiny detail he was given. The text actually repeats that Noah did everything just as God commanded him. And here's the kicker. In this story, obedience isn't some separate thing from faith, it is the proof of his faith. And this obedience goes right down to collecting the animals, where there's this really fascinating detail. Noah was told to bring 2 of every unclean animal, but 7 pairs of every clean animal, the ones that were considered pure and could be used for worship. Now, that's not a random number. It was deliberate planning for how to properly start a relationship with God in this new world. And this is where you see the ark's true purpose. It wasn't just a boat. It was like a floating sanctuary, a tiny, self-contained world carrying the seeds of the next one. It was literally a vessel of hope, floating on waters of judgment, holding the entire future of life on earth. So the ark's built, everyone's inside, the door is shut, and then the story reaches its terrifying climax. The flood itself is shown as so much more than a rainstorm. It's an event of cosmic proportions. The commentary uses this really powerful term for it, decreation. The idea is that the flood is basically the creation story from Genesis happening in reverse. You know how creation separated the waters? Well, the flood undoes that, letting the world dissolve back into that formless, watery chaos it came from. And the scale of this thing is just immense. We all remembered the 40 days of rain, right? But the text says the waters covered the entire earth for a staggering 150 days. The whole ordeal, from the first raindrop to finally stepping off the ark, lasted for more than a year. Just let that number sink in for a second. 150 days. That is 5 months where there was nothing to see but water. It really drives home the sheer totality of this decreation, the complete reset of the world that was. But, just like creation came out of chaos in the beginning, a new beginning follows this decreation. After all that time cooped up in the ark, the judgment is over and the survivors are now facing a totally new world. Can you just imagine that moment? Stepping out of the dark, stuffy ark and into the bright sunlight, feeling solid ground under your feet, knowing you are the only people left on the entire planet? Wow, it must have been this incredible mix of relief and just immense responsibility. So what's the very first thing Noah does in this brand new world? He builds an altar. He offers a sacrifice to God. And that is why he needed to bring those extra clean animals on board. This first act of worship sets the foundation for the entire relationship between humanity and God from that point forward. And this act of worship gets a response, a divine response that becomes the ultimate point of the entire story, a promise that changes everything for the future. The key word here is covenant, or enyak, as it's written in our Korean source text. Now, this isn't just a simple promise. Think of it like a formal, binding contract. And what's so important is that God starts it. It's a divine promise that lays out the new rules of the relationship between God and every living thing. So what does this covenant say? Well, it's pretty profound. God promises to never, ever again destroy the earth with a flood. And this promise isn't just for Noah or even just for people. It's for every living creature for all time. And he seals it with a sign that everyone can see, the rainbow in the clouds. There's this quote from the source material that just reframes the whole story so beautifully. It suggests that even in the darkest moment, when the world was being washed away, the story was never really about destruction. The ark was being held safe not just by wood and pitch, but by a divine promise of preservation that was there from the very beginning. So, when you boil it all down, the story of Noah's Ark leaves us with this really powerful idea. It suggests that survival isn't just about getting through the storm. It's about holding on to the promise of what comes next. And that kind of makes you think, right? When we're facing our own floods, our own crises, how does remembering a promise, focusing on a new beginning, change how we get through the chaos?